All right, welcome back to the slideshow. I'm Dakota Jackson. I'm a trombonist here in New Orleans, devoted to cultivating an interest and appreciation of the trombone. And I got my two co-hosts with me doing the three-way pod as we continue this season. Got Ben and Jared. Jared, what's your week look like, man?
The week's looking pretty busy actually. I got a couple gigs coming up, but finally the summer's coming around. If you've listened to the podcast before, you know I'm a trombonist based in Salt Lake City, and we're just getting out of winter right now, so gigs are finally starting to show up again.
Heck yeah. Also, ITF is going to be in Salt Lake, right?
Yes, that's July. Let's see, July 12th to 15th, Salt Lake City. If you guys are in town, come hit me up. I'll come say hi.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty high chance that I'll be there. Probably crashing with Jared.
Yeah.
But also, I don't know. No, nothing official on my end yet. What's up with you, Ben? How's your week going, man?
Yeah, so we're into the second week of April. That means that my life pretty much transitions to being mostly a fishing guide. So at this point, I pretty much spend my time on the water. I'm looking to play some more trombone, especially as I before I go up to Alaska for the summer. But yeah, so at this point in my time, I usually transition to focusing more on fishing. I heard Jared say that the winter's over and gigs are coming, but it's weird for me. The winter is time for indoor things like trombone. So as I get out of winter, my focus has to shift a bit. But I'm glad to be here. It just means my schedule gets a little busier. That's all. Things are good. How about you, Cody?
Things are going good, man. Getting a lot of gigs, trying to transition to full time playing, doing some lessons, which I dig doing the lessons a lot, man. I think I've talked about this before, but like on the pod, I try not to do pedagogy stuff, and I try not to talk about pedagogy stuff, and there's a bunch of different reasons for that. But it is nice, like I do have a lot of thoughts, and I like teaching people who want that, who want to come pay me to do that. And also like the gigs are pretty nice. Like it's like festival season here. Like I've got two French Quarter Fest gigs, which are the 14th and the 16th, with two different Latin bands, and then two Jazz Fest gigs as well, which is like the 29th, and then I think when is the next one? Like the 6th of May. I don't know. I got a bunch of stuff coming up. I also, I've got another gig coming up with my quintet, which I'm super psyched about. That's kind of like my main little passion, aside from all the like sideman stuff I do. I really like to play with the quintet and play music I think is cool with people I think are cool, and play some hard stuff that I want to play, which that's gonna right now it's looking like May 10th at BMC. If you are listening to this and able to make it to that, I'm sure that's actually a pretty slim number of people. I think it's pretty cool that I've talked about this before, but like it's always nice when I go around talking to people I know in town. I talk about the pod and they're like, "Oh, check it out." And it was like, "Oh, only if you want to." Because you guys, you're like in all over. You guys are in Germany listening to this, and that's sick. Like I don't need people in New Orleans to listen for saying. I mean, I'm not saying I don't want people in New Orleans to listen, but yeah, it's like it's pretty sick to have a cool listener base from all over. Um, so I think we're gonna introduce a new segment. I'm gonna let let Ben kind of take it over, but we are getting rid of trombone in the news, and I'll let Ben go from there because he's like the expert.
I don't know about expert, but yeah, we just decided that as we were studying up for the podcast, like we always do, this has been in the works for at least a couple podcasts, I believe. We've at least talked about this before. Trombone in the news has been really hard to find trombone in the news that is current news, and in order to keep things interesting, we were on the fence about it. And then one day, as I was procrastinating and talking to Cody and just coming up with different ideas, I brought up the idea of, hey man, let's just put whatever our podcast idea is on AI, like on Chat GPT, and try to see what happens, see if it gives us any helpful information. We got some interesting results. And so we didn't really use the results we got from it very much. But we did decide that we're going to have a new segment in which we'll take whatever the subject of this week's show is, and we'll just enter it into Chat GPT, which is an AI that learns as you communicate with it, and also communicates with the internet and other resources to answer questions you have, develop lists, things like that. It thinks on its own, supposedly. It's developed by a company named OpenAI. It's very open source at the moment. They are very open about everything they're doing. It's pretty neat. And they actually have some free tools that you can just play around with. Actually, they call it the playground, one of the tools that you can use and mess with. This is a ChatGPT, which is there for those listening. If you're listening later, and if you've messed with this before, I know a lot of people have. This is the March 23rd version because it does update quite a bit. So I want to make sure, because the answers have been getting better and better. From the last time Cody and I did this, we were kind of surprised by the how the answers have changed. Okay, so for the prompt, I asked ChatGPT, what are some examples of the use of effect pedals on the trombone? After that, I pressed enter, and right now it is typing out or generating the answer for this. Let's see. Yeah. All right. So it's giving us a few different examples. Here we are. It says, you can hear the use of effects pedals on the trombone by listening to recordings or watching videos of trombone players who use them in their performances. Some examples of trombone players who use effects pedals include Ryan Porter. Ryan Porter is a jazz trombonist who has used effects pedals in his music. You can listen to his album Force for Good to hear some of his pedal work. Niels Wahlgren is a German trombonist who is known for his use of effects pedals. You can check out his album Route 70 to hear some of his effects pedal work. And then James McCulley. James McCulley is an Australian trombonist who has used effects pedals in his music. You can listen to this album Today Will Be Another Day to hear some of his pedal work. And then it goes on to suggest that we can search YouTube and our other platforms to find more examples. But what we noticed whenever we started searching these, now just so you guys know, this was generated just now. So searching some of these trombonists. First off, I'll ask Cody because he's listened to a lot of trombone players, and I'll ask both of you guys. Have you guys heard of any of these players before?
Yeah, I've definitely heard of Nils. Like he's like a big multiphonics guy. I think he's like a big fan of Mangelsdorf, that kind of vein. I could. The thing is with all three of these. So I'm not really that familiar with Ryan Porter. Who was the third guy that was on there?
It was James McCulley. He's an Australian trombonist, is what it says.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with him myself. I do think it's interesting that it pulls like more obscure references. Like, we'll talk about this because we did the pod, but like I think I pulled more topical one, like more like big examples. I kind of dig that it's like going deep. Like I don't know. Like we were kind of joking about this, but like maybe a ChatGPT is the answer to exposure for lesser known artists.
So I'll be honest. I saw Niels Wahlgren and immediately was like, oh, it just got Niels Lindgren wrong. That's what I thought. I don't know him off the top of my head.
Niels Lindgren does use pedals. I know that for sure.
Yeah.
So
we'll be talking about
it is
that
possible.
So
it is possible that it kind of discombobulated. But I can't definitively say that. I actually don't know how you say his last name. You say Wahlgren? I mean, that sounds right.
Yeah,
I don't know.
So he's German. So yeah, it's gonna be Wahlgren or yeah.
Yeah.
Or I guess Wahlgren. Yeah, it would be.
Yeah, I can't definitively say that he doesn't use pedals, although I think commonly he's not a pedal guy. Like I said, he is a very big multiphonics guy, which is just technique stuff.
But either way, we kind of noticed some different things earlier on. I think the first time we did it, and part of the reason why we scrapped the idea of using it for the podcast, to actually generate ideas, was the fact that it was giving blatantly false information. I remember it did say early on, I think I found the old, I don't have it anymore. I had an old ChatGPT post where we were talking about trombone effects pedals, and it said Wayne Shorter was its number one recommendation. He was a trombonist report. So
yeah, Wayne Shorter, the tenor sax player. The fun thing we have noticed, so the Wayne Shorter thing is hilarious, is that, it has gotten smarter, which is a little creepy. But on top of that, when it's wrong, it's a pretty effective liar, and that's pretty disturbing. Because if we're being real, even Wayne Shorter, which is an outlandish one, I don't know how removed you'd have to be. If you'd never listened to jazz and they were like, "Oh, Wayne Shorter, the trombonist," you'd be like, "That sounds right." Yeah.
It's hard to back it up too with I'm trying to look at Ryan Porter to see if there's any use of effects pedals, but maybe.
You better listen to the album to prove it wrong.
Exactly. Because you're not going to be talking about it most of the time. So things like that, if it just lies about it, it is a pretty effective liar.
Yeah, we did pull some examples earlier too, where it was saying that people were using. There was one that I knew was wrong because I'm an obsessive listener, but
it was Recordame.
Yeah, it was Conrad Herwig on Recordame, which was on his Latin Slide album. But the thing is it thinks that people are using wah-wah pedals a lot, and I'm wondering if it's confusing plunger usage with effect pedal usage too. That could be a whole thing, I don't know.
Well, and we're going to talk about the horns influence on effects pedals too, because there's actually a good relationship between things like the plunger and even Harman mutes like the wah-wah on the invention of things like the wah pedal. So
yeah, well, that'll be fun. That'll be fun to keep doing. I like that. I actually kind of like that it's gotten better, because part of me thought it'd be funny to just put it on blast, oh, Wayne Shorter, how stupid, ChatGPT. But I like now that it's almost matching me and knowledge about the trombone. It's a little disturbing too. I don't know.
Yeah.
It might be a great way to find new trombonists for people on our podcast who are listening to our podcast. Ask it for some ideas. It pulled some deep cuts.
Yeah, I know. I kind of, man, maybe you know what? This would be a good time to plug something else. We have a Patreon, right? So we quit doing fake beer advertisements and stuff, and so we have a Patreon now. We put content out on. We put all the episodes on there, obviously. Then we put little playlists that we make for each episode on there, and we have what we're calling slideshow deep dives. It's kind of a name pending, but we've been using it for a minute, so it's probably gonna stick. It's just kind of a different style. It's a little more off the cuff. It's not researched like the podcast is. We just go in and just talk about trombone, and you get to see our faces because I'm just recording the video. So that'll be fun if that's something you're into. I have a very large hat collection. If you're a hat collector, you should definitely sign up for the Patreon. I've got 40 plus hats or something. It's something ridiculous. You can see all those. But we should do that for a Patreon episode. We'll do that. We'll talk about we'll just shove some weird stuff in it. I'd be interested. What is it going to pull up if I say what are some standard trombone repertoire? Does it know good concertos? Or is it going to pull out deep cuts? That'd be interesting too. I'm kind of into that. So on the topic of ChatGPT stuff, obviously the topic for this episode is trombone effect pedals. Full disclosure, we were going to do early effect pedals, but then we realized that that's way too specific for what we're getting into, so this will be the intro into trombone pedals. I'm not going to really speak for everyone else, but from a personal note, I will say that this was a very diving in and finding out about stuff. I knew people had used them, and I knew a couple albums off the top of my head, but I've never personally used effect pedals, and kind of learned a lot of different stuff going in. So if you listen to this and you're oh, you guys can talk about whatever, shoot that our way. I'm totally down to check stuff out, maybe even give you a shout out and let people know about stuff. But yeah, what's I guess we'll just go around the room here. Ben, what's your knowledge with pedals before this episode?
So before this episode, I experimented a little bit with them just because I had some early experience in junior high playing guitar and messing around with like some multi effects pedals and a couple really cheap like $20 stomp boxes, but nothing serious. And I'm not saying I was good at any of it. I definitely didn't have anything set up right. I never figured out how to actually successfully loop myself or anything, but I had a little bit of knowledge. But it was pretty cool to go back and actually look at it from an adult point of view and realize like what was actually going on. So it was really fun actually studying this podcast and getting to see the side of it that I was just missing back in the 8th grade or whatever when I was trying to play as loud and get the heaviest distortion I could.
Yeah, man. Jared, do you have any pedal knowledge? Ever hook a pedal up to the trombone?
Yeah, most of my experiences with a loop pedal. So I have one of the Boss RC 300s, I believe it's called. It's just one of the standard loop stations. And it has built-in effects in it. They're not that good. They're functional, but the looping on it is actually pretty good. Other than that, not really much independent pedal use.
Cool, man. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know if you're like sitting in your office and you have like a pedal board for your trombones, like I'm more than willing to concede that you know more about pedals than I do. I'm not. Hopefully, I think the goal for this will be like hopefully you'll, if you know nothing, you'll like learn about some stuff and get a good intro, and if you do know a lot, hopefully you'll pick up like an album or something to listen to because we're gonna talk about that. But first, we'll let Ben talk about just like how pedals work in general, and like different kinds of pedals, and kind of get us going on like what's up with the pedals in general.
So whenever we were going to talk about how pedals work, I decided to dive into that, and I had to set some barriers for myself. I said I wasn't going to necessarily go all the way into figuring out with the speaker, like how actually the speakers themselves were working. I was just going to follow the effects pedals and try to really keep it layman's. So please bear with me. Like Cody said, if you run these types of rigs regularly, you know more than me, I promise. So I will concede that. But so for those of you who don't know, an effects pedal is, or effects pedals were first created to create a different sound other than your original or live sound. The first instruments that they were really used on were guitars, and it was a volume pedal. So when the electric guitar came around, it was real quick. Rowe Industries created the Diamond Model 600 volume pedal. And all this did was adjust your volume from low to high. It was just made it to where a guitarist could easily do that without going up to a speaker or adjusting the volume manually with his hands. He was able to just push his foot down, volume would go up. Very simple. All right. In 1941, the Model 601 tremolo control was released. And I found this one to be really interesting because what it would do was before this pedal was filled with a electrolytic fluid, which all that means is that it conducts electricity. It's like a water-based. So usually they add something like salt to make it conduct electricity more. And you have a cord plugged in on one side. You have this fluid in the middle that is going through where you would normally have wire. You'd have this fluid. What that's doing is transmitting the signal to the next wire to the output. So your input, fluid, output. Well, because it's a fluid, it would make this weird kind of swishing effect or tremolo effect. It was very shaky because that fluid was never stable. And so that was the first analog tremolo effects pedal. It was used for guitar, but you could actually do it with a voice and get some weird effects if you plugged a microphone up. There's some pretty interesting things. So what I decided to do when I saw this, I found the first recording you could find of that tremolo effect being used, that specific one at least, the Model 601. It was Bo Diddley had one. This group had one hit, I guess group or singular artist. I could only find one recording, so I couldn't tell if that was a band name or the person. But Bo Diddley's song was titled Bo Diddley, so not a very hard piece to find. And anyways, you could hear that weird early tremolo effect, which I haven't quite heard anything like it. It's pretty neat. So that was the first recording that you used of a effects pedal that was actually used to modify the sound that was coming through a speaker at a live event. And then the next really effect that came about would have been distortion. What's interesting about distortion was that it was originally came out for a guitar to mimic the sound of either a trumpet or a trombone. It was the Gibson Maestro Fuzz Tone. When it was first released, it was $40, by the way. But what it did was actually cause the bass side of the signal to distort, and that's where you get a lot of your popular rock sounds today. It really wasn't popular. Nobody used fuzz tones until the Rolling Stones released I Can't Get No Satisfaction. Once they released that, it was over. Gibson couldn't keep up with the demand. They were having to up their production. Everybody was using distortion on their rock albums, and everybody who wanted to sound like Keith Richards was buying a distortion pedal, when they were playing in their garage or whatever.
So original distortion was supposed to sound like horns?
Yes, that's right.
That's weird.
I can kind of see that.
Think...
Well, it adds like the saturation. You're gonna get more harmonics. I think maybe brassier. I guess.
I take it as pride.
I guess
they tried
stealing jobs from the get-go, huh? I don't know.
On that note, speaking of stealing jobs, maybe a little bit of a rabbit hole. I've been on exactly one cruise in my life, and on that cruise, they had a small band. I wouldn't call it a big. It was about a 10-person group, so borderline small big band. But it was a lot of saxophones for some reason. Saxophones and trumpets. There was no trombones, but 2 of the trumpets had effects pedals, and they were actually using octave effects pedals, which actually lower their tone to play the trombone parts. So witnessed that on a cruise line. I'd never seen anything like that. So they were actually trumpet players were stealing jobs from trombone players doing that. So little rabbit hole dive there, but it's not warranted.
This effect pedal episode is starting pretty dark.
Okay, so
effect pedals with the enemies. I think that's what we've learned. Established pretty quick.
Okay, so after the early adoption of distortion, the wah pedal was first invented by an engineer named Brad Plunkett. He was 20 years old. He was charged with the task of making amplifiers cheaper to produce. And what he did was he replaced a mid-boost switch with a potentiometer, which all that is just a number gauge. And whenever he adjusted the mid-boost number gauge, his potentiometer, when he adjusted that, he noticed that it created a weird pitch fluctuation, and he liked the effect. He liked the sound. So then he took the idea from the volume pedal to be able to go from 0 to 10 using your foot, and did that to that's where he came up with the idea for the wah pedal, which became very popular and was often used to actually imitate trumpet harmony mutes. I don't know if I can think of any early examples of trombone harmony mutes before this, but I'm sure there are. But it was used to emulate the harmony mute in general. So that's the wah pedal, which trombone has tons of use on the trombone, and probably one of the most popular ones you're going to see for trombone. And then after that, you started to see different types of pedals, such as like chorus or vibrato, and we started to see a little bit of mixing when it came to going from analog to the world of digital effects pedals. And that was really the next big jump, is whenever we start using computers we start using computers and memory banks to store these effects rather than using physical processes such as changing coils, adjusting EQs, or even using fluid to change things around.
So, with a wah pedal, is it distorting the pitch, or is something else happening?
What he's doing is he is just adjusting the mid boost on the EQ. It's like a constant mid boost. So they were trying to make amps cheap. They had a mid boost on amplifiers at that time. 0 to 10, a potentiometer. Replace the switch with a potentiometer, something you could adjust. It was supposed to make them cheaper. He found out he liked what it did to the pitch itself whenever you adjusted it. And he found out, if that's a gauge 0 to 10, he could do it, open, close. He could do it with a volume pedal.
I feel like kind of maybe this is like a very trombone centric thought, but I think that like a lot of early effect pedals are people just trying to imitate what was happening with mutes and stuff, but with strings. Like it's harder to, plungers and pixie mutes and straight mutes and cut mutes and all this different stuff is like affects the sounds, but with guitar it's a little more difficult to do without the aid of electronics.
Yeah, exactly. And the electronics are mostly the instrument we're talking about here. It's really not the trombone itself, because we can also talk about using these same effects on the voice, the guitar, or anything else. And so the electronics really are the instrument that's going to be evolving through here, because at first it's just an electric current. Your microphone produces so you have a specific electric current running through. You have the signal is what you'll hear. And you want in a completely analog signal, it's all hardwired. There's no computers involved. There's not a hard stop there. There is a constant flow from instrument to amplifier. And so now we have the evolution of digital pedals. Yeah, so you started seeing more digital technology come around in the 1980s. But what a digital effect is just any effect that uses a computer to adjust the signal and then send an output back out. So what it would do is it would do the mid boosting for you if you're using digital wah. I don't know if you're using a digital wah. If you wanted an auto wah, actually, not Ottawa the city, but auto wah, which is actually mostly used on trombone anyways. If you wanted to use like an auto wah, that would be something digital. It would actually stop there. It would imitate that effect on the computer. Then it would choose as an output. Because of that, there's a little bit of a delay. But so a digital effects pedal will take that signal. I guess we'll take that signal as an input. It'll adjust it, either mid boosting it for like an auto wah or something like that, and then as the output, it would send it back out. But because of that, it would sometimes cut out a lot of the noise that you get with analog effects, and that noise really does become part of the music to some people, and I believe it's noticeable. For example, if you're using tremolo effect, that's going to be a lot more random if it's some fluid bouncing around in a box, or if it's a computer generated effect you're trying to emulate. Like it's still a computer. Depending on how advanced it is, it might sound more authentic like that, but you're not going to get that same sound really as hard as you try with that. So that's what the difference between analog and digital are. For practical usage, big thing you're going to look at if you're a trombonist is going to be, are you going to get a pedal board or like a multi-effects pedal, or are you going to get a board full of, they'll call it individual stomp boxes or something like that, where you have multiple effects at a station? I think you notice most professionals are going to have those individual effects because they have a certain sound they want, and they just buy each pedal they need to get that sound. They kind of have the idea in their head. But for most people, you find the multi-effects make sense because of the cost. You can buy like a $160 pedal and really get by with it better than you think, and have most of the effects that you wanted. So you really see those choices being made a lot on cost, ease of use. The trombone, for example, not gonna see a ton of trombonists using an effects pedal on every one of their gigs. So would it make sense to pay $1,500 for one that you might not make $1,500 on effects pedal gigs in 7 years? And by that time, the next big thing will be out. The effects pedals aren't the only thing that affect the sound that comes out of the speakers or the sound that the listener is going to hear. The input is equally as important. The reason these effects pedals sound so much different from instrument to instrument, even though the effect is supposed to be the same, has to do with the fact that the input coming in, the sound that the effects pedal is modulating, sounds different. For example, if you were playing a trombone versus playing a guitar, you can use the effect on either one, but the sounds are going to be tremendously different. So the way you record that input is equally as important. There's a couple different ways that people actually plug into an input or plug into an effects pedal. The most common way nowadays is going to be using a microphone of some sort. You just plug a microphone directly into the pedal and you are good to go. That's the most common way. If it's a dynamic microphone, supposedly you don't get as much of the trombone articulation, or you don't get as much of the extra sound, like the articulation of the air. Yes, sir.
I could speak on that real quick. I think
absolutely, please.
with dynamic microphones, you get what's called the proximity effect. So it just ends up boosting the lower frequencies, which is a lot with like live music. You get that a lot because a lot of trombonists will just shove their bell into it and then it ends up just rounding it a lot. I think that's usually why is what's called the proximity effect.
Jared is our resident studio guy.
Yeah.
He knows about recording people. That's cool.
Just so you know, I was completely clueless on this, so this is very important that Jared comes in.
No, that's a great point to make, though.
I actually wanted to. I wanted to research this because I wanted to learn. I didn't know anything about it, so I wanted to read about it. So that's awesome. Anyways, so yeah, the input's really important. But another way that you'll hear trombonist inputting or just plugging into an effects pedal is using something called a silent brass system. This was made popular. Using this technique was made popular by a trombone quartet called the Maniacal Four. They were really the ones who went viral, and then you started seeing more people do this on YouTube, and they realized, oh man, I can plug my trombone up to a guitar amp and play the guitar solo from Carry On My Wayward Son. It sounded really cool, really good. But yeah, you see these people, and what this does is it actually cuts out a lot of the trombone sound, because if you've ever played on a silent brass mute, you cannot hear yourself play it, or you can barely hear yourself play it. It is
hence the name, silent brass.
It does a very good job of being silent.
Yeah, I was talking a bit about this. Like, mine quit working. I'm not trying to diss the silent brass company. I bought it like 10 years ago, so I don't really know when the expected waiver. But they used to look like little torpedoes. I got like a big one.
Oh yeah,
sitting right here. Now they're much more.
You have a Gen 1? I have a Gen 1 as well.
Yeah, the big ones. I kind of like them like that, big and fat on the end. But now they're all smoothed off and fancy looking. I actually think the Maniacal 4 is on an early one though, right? Like they have like a fat one.
I think it's on an early one. Yeah,
he was playing on an early one, and I cannot confirm whether or not it was recorded with a silent brass, like the actual album itself. I know the YouTube video was. I can't confirm if the album was, because the YouTube videos came out, they went viral. But if you were to go in a studio, I don't believe a silent brass is really a commonly used method. I think the electronics in that are pretty subpar for recording compared to a lot of other options out there from what I was reading.
Interesting. Well, I mean, also to be fair, like, how many studios are like, oh yeah, every week I got trombone players coming in here trying to make guitar sounds with their trombone. So, you know.
Yeah, but I also think that Yamaha probably didn't have in mind somebody recording an album with it either.
That's true. This is getting into a real deep philosophy thing here about what Yamaha intended with the silent brass. Do we endorse silent brass? Do we not? That's more Patreon content. Go to Patreon, I'll tell you.
I own one for what it's worth. Yeah, they're quiet if you need to play when it's quiet. As a bass trombone player, I'll say get the small one because I have the big one and it's very heavy.
Yeah, if you go to the Patreon, I will show you my Black Torpedo silent brass. It doesn't work anymore. Well, actually, to be fair, it does still work as a practice mute. Like, the electronics don't work, but it still, as Ben pointed out, does make things quiet. So, I guess there's that.
But yeah, most of the time though, I see that people are using microphones to record now. And so with those two things alone, you get a variety of sounds, but choosing which one you get really depends on whatever your use is for it. There's a lot of different options out there. I'll just say from experience I messed around with the silent brass thing. It was pretty hard to set up. The microphone thing is a lot easier to set up, but it also is kind of fun being able to play your trombone into your headphones, with whatever effects you have on your mind too. So I don't know. There's some different philosophies there, but yeah, that's what I have about just kind of how they work early, just in the history of them and how they came to be.
Very cool. Yeah, with the silent brass thing, go to, I don't know, ITF or Gin or something. They're at a lot of conferences and stuff. You can check them out. It seems like they're around. And like we're all like me and Ben are talking about the old ones. Like I really have no idea. I think that like the sound quality is better because there was kind of like a weird effect where like when you were listening to them, it was picking up the input of your trombone and then sending it back to you. I noticed some like once again, this isn't talking about the current product because this is like old defuncto stuff now, but like there was kind of a thing where like with the volume level, you get to a certain point and it would just cap you. Which I don't know about all that. But yeah, we'll be back. We're gonna take a short break and then me and Jared are gonna talk about some like electronic trombone pedal stuff you can actually listen to. And the Infinisphere. So that'll be fun. All right, welcome back to the slideshow. I'm Dakota Jackson. We're talking about pedals. And the second half here, I think we're just going to talk about some albums to check out and just in general pedal stuff. We kind of broke it up by genre between me and Jared. But, also, like Ben just hit you with a whole bunch of techie stuff about how pedals work. I am not going to do that in this section. Like, I think my goal is to just kind of hit different stuff and talk about maybe like what the pedal was, but I definitely won't be talking about like crazy tech stuff unless someone else interjects with it, because I kind of Neanderthal brain just like sounds good, makes fun sound, so we're gonna set off with like some pedal usage in jazz, and more specifically kind of the album that I think got the ball rolling on this, or at least the original topic, which was going to be early effect pedals. And this is album called The Last Recording by Frank Rosolino. And I've actually been kind of fascinated with this album for a bit. So it's a post-mortem album, meaning that it was released post his death. Obviously, it's recorded right before he died. But it was recorded in 1978 and released, I think, in 1984, maybe 1982. But there's little debates on why it was hard to get put out. One train of thought was that the effect pedals were the reason, that like people weren't looking for that in the market. I kind of don't think that is why it was hard to release. I think more likely is the really unfortunate nature of Frank Rosnio's death was something that was kind of known, especially from people who would have been releasing this, and I think they kind of wanted to avoid that for obvious reasons. But the album is just 3 tunes long. It's Misty, Waltz for Diane, and I Thought About You. There's actually 6 tunes on the album, but that's just there's like a radio edit version, and then there is a longer version of each of the tunes. So there's basically 2 recordings of each of those on the album. The effect pedal he used on the album was a Conn multivider, which pretty funny. You can actually still buy Conn multiviters. I found a couple different places selling them, and there's like 2 different versions of them. One of them is very like blocky and kind of 90s 80s tech looking. The other one has kind of more of like a, like, I don't know, I don't really explain this, but like kind of like a 50s look almost to it. Like it's got like red, and it says multivider up at the top. But they both have like the same like setup as far as dials and everything. But I would not suggest buying one of these, although I do think it's fun to go look them up and you can see them in mint condition and whatnot. But all of them kind of say that if you buy them, they're not going to work because, I mean, they're super old. And the wires on them are incredibly old, so, and they're pretty expensive. I mean, maybe if you're a collector of pedals, it's a cool buy, but I wouldn't buy one for actual usage, especially since if you listen to the album, the only effect that's actually happening is that it's an octave effect. So everything he's playing is in octaves. And I actually think this album is really, I've listened to this album a bunch. So the first time I listened to it, I was not really entirely sure what was going on because it's kind of surprisingly subtle. And there's a couple albums where I think that the recording of Frank kind of changes his tone quite a bit. But it is really interesting that he's got the octave effect going on. Once you know that's going on, you can really hone into listening to that too. There's also kind of this thing about how it works. I will say that I was looking into this, and the Conn multivider is like the Conn's answer to the Selmer Veritone, which came out in 1967. Now the Veritone, and for that matter, the Conn multivider and a couple other like horn companies tried to release pedals, which I think is kind of interesting. Like Conn doesn't make pedals now, at least to my knowledge. But it was kind of this weird, same with Selmer, but it was this weird movement where they were trying to get, like horn companies were trying to get pedals out there to try and combat like the British invasion, if you will, and like the rock wave that was coming in and maybe try and get into this market. And I think as we talked about in the first half, like people now are just using those pedals now for the trombone stuff. So I think that like it wasn't a successful venture for anyone. I did find a pretty interesting article on the Selmer Veritone. It says right here, the Selmer Veritone developed units for flute, saxophone, and clarinet. Obviously, the Conn multivider's big thing was that it also did trombone and trumpet. The system included a integrated pickup microphone and a control box, which allowed the player to use effects such as tremolo, basic EQ, bright and dark, simultaneous sub-octaves, and echo in conjunction with the purpose-built amplifier. The ceramic microphone was developed... Oh, by the way, I think this is kind of crazy. If you haven't seen one of these, it's like a little bitty, tiny, like, ceramic chip, almost, which I didn't know people used ceramic microphones. Like, I didn't even know that was a thing. I guess it was kind of to deal with moisture. Yeah, actually, that's what it says right here. The microphone was developed to withstand high sound pressure and moisture levels, and built into the head joint of the flute, the neck joint of the saxophone, the barrel joint of the clarinet. The pickup was wired to a preamplifier and a control box, which was either mounted to the bottom of the key guard, clipped to the player's belt, or hung on a cord around the player's neck. I don't really know. I don't really know what Frank's particular setup with this was. I'd assume since he was in the studio, he probably didn't have it like in a mobile setup at all. But Steve Goodson has a fairly good article on talking about kind of this whole venture and how it didn't work. He's with Sax Gourmet. If you're a saxophone guy, this is all really familiar terms. These are kind of terms that I've heard from a distance. But it is kind of interesting thinking about like effects usage like at this point. Like I've always found this album pretty interesting because it was released right before Frank's death, and I wonder if this was something that Frank was thinking about pushing into. I mean, if he'd have lived another 10 years, if we'd have come up with a bunch of sounds similar to maybe like Miles Davis and Bitches Brew and kind of that period of his life, like trying to push into something else almost. That being said, he does just play like straight ahead jazz on the album. But I do think that's kind of interesting, and if you get a chance, you should go check out the pedals, and then go check out the album. Obviously, his playing is phenomenal. There's a couple other jazz things I kind of wanted to get into, kind of in descending order here of, I think, significance. I wanted to talk about Robin Eubanks. I think this is the next like real huge hit into trombone with pedals. And specifically EB3, which was the name of his group and album, but I just want to talk about Robin in general. He has like a lot of interesting thoughts on electric trombone, and maybe this is a bold statement, but I kind of think he's like currently the most prolific person in terms of a trombone person using electronics. Not that other people aren't doing it more or maybe even better, but like in terms of influence they've had, I know, I saw Nick Finzer talking about how that EB3 album kind of had an impact on him, and I know it's something that Robin's kind of put time aside for. It was a 2007 release. It was listed as funk and jazz rock. It's just a trio with a keyboardist and Robin, and then a piano player. A drummer. The drummer, actually, funny enough, plays like a synth bass. So the drummer is playing drums and only playing with one hand. The other hand, he's playing the synth bass the whole time. So and it's pretty cool because this was like a CD DVD release. So there's like the normal CD releases, but I think all the DVD stuff is like out on YouTube now if you want to go check it out. And it uses like a mixture of like effect pedals and loops. He's got like a little board set up, and he does a lot of cool multimeter stuff. He also like, there's definitely like a non-jazz influence. Like he has a tune called Blues for Jimmy, which is like dedicated to Jimi Hendrix, which I think is really cool. And then he just has like a solo piece called Me, Myself, and I. If you haven't heard Robin Eubanks, he's like super killing. He was in Art Blakey's group at one point. And then since then has been in like a number of pretty big groups, and I think he's also he's like teaches at Oberlin as like a teacher, so he's had a big impact there. But certainly like a trombone player you should check out. So his trombone playing is super solid, even if you're not necessarily going for the electronic effect side of things. And I do think it's kind of interesting. Like, I know he did some loops when he was with San Francisco Jazz Collective, particularly with like on their Stevie Wonder album, which I can't remember what the name of that was. It's a black cover with like a yellow title. It's like Sir Duke or something. It's one of his tunes, I believe, but I could be wrong. The Superstition on that I listened to a ton, like right around my freshman year or something. I actually was really into Robin Eubanks for a second. Like he, I don't know why I've kind of like veered away. Not that I don't think he's a great player. I just like haven't listened to him as much lately. But like, I even bought the album Classic Rock Volume 1, which was just him playing like he played Kashmir and some other cool stuff on there. But I found a few little quotes of him talking about it. Unfortunately, not near as much as I would like. But there are some cool quotes here. He says, I was a great soloist with a band I was a guest soloist with a band in Lausanne, Switzerland, and the sax player had a mic clipped on his bell. During the intermission, I asked him if I could clip it on my bell and plugged it into the guitar player's rig, and all kinds of bells and whistles went off in my head. I said, "This is it." Then the guy goes to say, Here's another one where he said, how did you get interested in electronic effects with the trombone? What advice can you give to someone wanting to experiment with it? And he said, the first music that I enjoyed was R&B, rock, and funk. There weren't too many trombone players featured in that music. And I played local funk bands in Philly growing up. I wanted to play solos, but limitations that I had playing when I was younger limited desire other sounds. The technology that wasn't developed to the point that I could get to the sounds that I wanted using the trombone. In recent years, technological advances have allowed me to get closer to those sounds that I desired when I went to play electric trombone, in quotations. My advice to people wanting to experiment is learn to play straight acoustic bone as well as you can before experimenting. The route to successful trombone lies in the fundamentals. And that was from like a online trombone journal interview. I just want to take a second and note that he says electric trombone. And believe it or not, when I was looking through this stuff, I found more than one person referencing electric trombone and acoustic trombone. And I find this pretty funny because they're the same instrument. Just like if you look at electric guitar versus acoustic guitar, they're like physically built different for obvious reasons. That being said, I'll get to a kind of weird case here in a second where things are actually different. But as far as what Robin Eubanks is doing, he is playing on a normal trombone. He's actually playing on a Yamaha, like a trigger trombone. One of the earlier models, like a 90s. I know this pod, I'm supposed to always give you guys like the most in-depth tech, but that wasn't necessarily my goal. But I do know it was a Yamaha, it's an early one. And in general, if you're like a fan of people who play on larger equipment, like a Steve Torre type or something, he's a really good one for that because he does use a big Yamaha, like what we would consider a concert Yamaha. He also has a pretty cool website, Horn FX. And I kind of toyed with it a little bit. There's like a cool bit of there's like a little layout of pedals, and you can click on each pedal, and when you click on the pedal, it tells you like what the pedal is and how it works with the trombone and how expensive it is. Kind of like a little pedal overlay, which I think is cool because there's not really a ton of resources specifically directed towards trombone and pedals. There's a lot of trombone resources, a lot of pedal resources, but not a lot of overlap. Kind of following that same train of thought, coming off of Robin Eubanks and talking about inspirations, Nick Finzer has some kind of cool YouTube videos. So this is another thing I want to talk about. We'll talk about this later at the end, but I mean, I'm kind of right immediately getting away from albums, which really speaks to kind of where the trombone and pedals are at. There's some cool YouTube stuff, and there's some people who use them pretty well, but there's not like a ton of albums. There's like 50 albums I could pick from that had like this guy's clearly using pedals all throughout this album, and then like I chose the best 10 of them. Like I immediately got into this Nick Finzer thing on YouTube, which I do think is somewhat valid. I mean, Nick Finzer like is a great trombonist, and YouTube is a platform for him to put stuff out on, but he has a thing called Streams of Consciousness for electric trombone. He said he'd been messing with pedals for around 15 years, and he said the video focuses on the loop and reverse delay function. That's in the description. If you go check it out, it's like he's in his office. It's one of his office hours. He just kind of like quickly puts it up. I think it's pretty cool sounding. But yeah, that's just like another resource for hitting up electric trombone stuff. There's two connected here that I want to get to in a second, but real quick, I want to talk about, I was part of Elliot Mason's Patreon for a minute. We're doing a lot of Patreon plugging this episode, which is kind of funny. But when I was doing that, there was he had like a couple videos he put out where he was messing with this, it was like a chord builder, basically. Like he would play a note, and then he could kind of pick the notes that were above his note, and so he was playing like in chords while he was playing one note. Which I think was super cool, and he kind of talked about that a little bit, so maybe go check out Elliot Mason's Patreon, which I'm more than happy to plug. He's an awesome trombonist with the Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra, and it seems like a really cool dude. And check some of that out. The next two people I want to talk about is I want to talk about the Bone Zone, which... I was having trouble finding this guy's name, but if you go, I'm sure he'd be more than happy for you to go check out his channel and find out that way. There's a YouTube channel called The Bone Zone, and has a number of interesting things. I think he played with a circus for a minute, maybe like I really don't know what the circus is, but he played with the circus for a minute. Has some videos about that, has some general trombone videos, but he has a lot of electric stuff, him playing through different amps, talking about different pedal usage. Most of these he's playing into a microphone and the microphone is pushing through, but I think even one of them he was kind of trying to build like a mute setup. So he had some cool videos, and through him I was able to learn about this guy, Justin Macadera. And I want to spend some time on this. I will say that some of the stuff, I don't know how well it went. There's a cool interview with him, and he has his website up, so you can check this out. But he has this thing called the Infinisphere, is what he calls it, which was a collaboration between him and BAC Music with Mike Horrigan. And basically what it is he has like a normal trombone, but then he has the Infinisphere, which is like a big metal ball that he puts on the end, which works as a mute, like it's to quiet everything down, but also it's, I think, purposely built to not be too stuffy. Like, I don't know if you guys have played a whole lot with mutes, but like usually you get a lot of back pressure, and he said it was still getting some of that, but not quite as much. So he has like this big metal ball on the end of it, and then he has, with his mouthpiece, he has a hole drilled into the side of it, and he has a pickup in it from, hold on one second, let me go over and see this name again. He has a pickup in it from Piezo Barrels, which they usually do clarinet and saxophone stuff, but he got like a custom order, and it is pretty crazy. Like, there is straight up a hole in the side of his mouthpiece, but he said he can cork it out for normal trombone playing. But it is primarily used for electric trombone playing. He actually called himself an electric trombonist and said that like 90% of his playing is on this particular setup. Actually, I'm looking at it now on the website, and it looks like it's a Doug Elliott mouthpiece that he's drilled a hole into the shank. But he considers himself like an electric trombonist. This is where he does most of his playing. He has a group, where he is the electric trombonist in the group, and then he has a acoustic trombonist in the group. This collab was in 2014, I believe, something like that. I don't know. He said that they were available to buy through BAC. Like that was going to be a plan. I've kind of had trouble myself going to BAC and finding these. That being said, knowing the nature of Mike and BAC, like, I'm sure if you wanted one of these and were going to shell out to buy one, that he could still make one for you, then he'd be more than willing. I say I don't actually know, but it's definitely something he could build. And another thing that he has on this horn is like right below the you get your two braces in the back on your tuning slide, right? Well, not the furthest back one, but the one right in front of that. He's got this big it's like hammered brass. It kind of looks like a moon rock or something almost, and on that he's got all of his stuff, so he can put like a little electric setup as well. And as I said earlier, like I don't have an insanely strong grasp of how all this is working, but I will say that you can go check all this out. He's got a if you Google Infinisphere, which is INFINISPHERE, his website will pop up, and you can go check out the Infinisphere, like little pictures of it. He's also got some videos of him playing with some pretty gnarly stuff. I did see he had like a pedal board and a preferred setup. If you go watch the Bone Zone video where he interviews him, you can listen to him talk about his preferred setup. I don't personally kind of know what's going on with all that. There's like 10 pedals on his pedal board or something pretty gnarly. But definitely something to check out, like the future of electric trombone, if you will. I do think that one of the things that I think about a lot in terms of playing electric trombone is if I play like the normal trombone with the mic, at what level is my sound coming out? And this definitely is thinking about that issue with this Infinisphere at the end. Like it's, you know, basically where you would have a screw bell. Like he has a normal bell that he can put on, but he also has the Infinisphere he can roll on. So it basically works the same way, except for that it's working as a mute, if you will. So I don't know, kind of got off into a kind of crazy deep dive there, but I'm going to let Jared talk to you about some funk examples, and then I'll be back in a second.
Yeah, so there's probably a lot more funk examples for pedals than I can find, but a great example of that funk sound would be Niels Landgren, which Dakota actually made me hip to him maybe like a year or two ago. Don't quite remember, but he uses it in his live shows and his multiple albums. He has his, I believe this is his newest album, License to Funk. You can hear on stuff like that, which on this album, and probably his go-to funk sound would be like an envelope filter, which is gonna be the same as the wah. It's just instead of having a wah pedal that you control, it's just based on the volume of the note. So it ends up giving that wah to each new attack of a note. And that's pretty distinct on most funk trombone pedal use. He also has on the song Browser's River Breakdown, which uses the same setup. It sounds exactly the same kind of thing. I also think it's good to point out that he mostly, as far as I know, only uses it actually for his solos, because I think it could get a little distracting as an ensemble if he's playing with people. Um, but also in his album Funk Is My Religion. Oh, I should also mention this is with his funk unit, his group. Um, the album is Funk Is My Religion, and this album uses a lot of effects that I actually think are probably digital and not through hardware. Because it mostly uses reverb and delay, which are probably the two easiest to get without a pedal, and find plugins for. But it's all over this album, especially on the solos again. Um, he's got the album Teamwork. There's a song Get Serious, Get a New Job. That one is interesting because it has that same envelope wah sound we were talking about, but it also kind of sounds like there's a low pass filter on it. So the higher end is either cut out, or it could be, like we mentioned earlier, um, using a dynamic microphone and it's the proximity effect, kind of how they recorded it. It might not be any sort of effect other than what microphone they used. Um, there's also, I found online, if you look at his videos, he has a bunch of resources and concerts recorded on YouTube. Um, I couldn't find any off the top of my head or what I looked through his albums using this, but on the video Jazz Baltica, I think it is a 2016 live performance, he uses a pedal that is um, harmonizing an octave above. Well, most all the examples, or like with the multivider we talked about earlier, it would either do below or harmony, but this one is a cool, like almost trumpety sound. It's still pretty distinctly different, but it kind of floats above what he's playing. But he's a great resource for funk and also pedal use. Um, After that, it actually gets quite a bit tricky trying to find examples. But so I'm going to use some deeper cuts, and you'll have to bear with me for this. But the trumpet player Russell Gunn, he has a album called Ethnomusicology Volume 2. And on there, there's this really cool version of Caravan that features the trombonist Andre Hayward, who I believe teaches in San Francisco. And that has a probably like the most bubbly wah sound you can get, which is, I believe, also an envelope filter because it is pretty much on every single attack of its notes. That version of Caravan, I wouldn't also call it funk. It's definitely more of a hip hop groove. hip hop jazz kind of thing going on, but I think it gets the same kind of funky sound that you'll start to notice. The envelope filter is the key to a funky trombone sound. Um, Divulging a little bit to the lower side, talking about the tuba player Theon Cross. I don't know if you guys have heard this guy, but he's a London-based tuba player, and his his music has pedals all throughout it. A lot of them sound like they could even be looped. But if you go through his album Intra One, here we go. We Go Again gives he has a octaver playing an octave below his already low tuba, which gives it this really subby hip hop crazy sound. It's also super distorted, or I would guess maybe it's a fuzz pedal. Um, Same with this whole album. That's kind of the standard with it. But if you look at forward progressions on this, he gets this like harmonized, distorted tuba sound, which could again it might not these might not be pedals. This could be post processing in a DAW, but I have it's throughout the whole album. And this is also where he uses a lot of delay, which essentially just copies and pastes the sound um, as the to make a delayed effect. It's the same thing as reverb, just with a more clear um, shadowing of it. I was gonna mention people like the trombonist Corey Henry, based out of New Orleans. He's done a lot of stuff with bands like Galactic and then his own group, the Funktet. And he doesn't use pedals, but he has a very distinct sound because he's known for shoving an SM57 almost all the way in his bell, and it gives this really round sound that doesn't exactly sound like what you'd expect a trombone to sound like, but it's become his like signature sound. And while it's not a pedal, it's a very clear use of technology to change how the trombone sounds in either a recording situation or a live performance. Um, and I got two more just to list off for you guys. I this isn't again, I'm not going into any like details on the pedals because my opinion is well, it's really hard to find is the exact gear they're using. But if you find any sort of distortion pedal, a fuzz, a wah, it's gonna do the same effect, and you just gotta read reviews. There's not a trombone specific pedal. There's just gonna be guitar pedals out there that you end up just putting your trombone through. But I found this guy, um, Raul Jesus Souza. It's a Brazilian guy from, well, let's see. If you look up his song, La La Song, which was produced in 1978, he uses some sort of effect. I'm assuming it sounds a lot like kind of a phaser, because it kind of just wobbles in and out of this different harmonic thing, and it kind of sounds bubbly like the envelope filter would do. I also think it's interesting to point out that it's on a valve trombone. I almost guarantee it's on a valve trombone because um, I'm not sure the historical reasons for this, but almost all the trombonists in Brazil play valve trombone, and especially if they're from around Rio.
Yeah, Raul de Souza
Um,
played some valve trombone too.
yeah, yeah, I'm
So
a
slideshow or valve show?
right. But dude, if you're talking about Brazilian
It's
trombonists,
it's relevant. It's
they
relevant.
they play valve trombone. I'm not exactly sure why. Um, Fun fact about him, as there's actually an album. I was just looking it up. Uh, so he ended up moving to LA, and when he's in LA, he worked with like a bunch of the jazz artists at the time. So he has an album called Colors that J.J. Johnson is credited as the conductor for the horns and also the arranger. Um, it also features Cannonball Adderley on two of the tracks. So really cool deep cut 1975 Raul de Souza colors, 1975. Um, and I just gotta throw this in there, even though yes, we are the slideshow, and this isn't this is a trumpet player, but probably one of the best instrumentalists to use a pedal or a brass player to use a pedal, which is Roy Hargrove with the RH Factor. His album Distractions or Hard Groove clearly has tons of envelope, delay, different harmonies, distortions, and he often, unlike a lot of the other albums we have mentioned so far, switches it on and off throughout the song many times. Like, so he'll be playing a solo, play four notes, and then he switches to the envelope filter, plays four more notes, or a delay that is only at the beginning of the thing, then he turns it off and then switches to a different effect. Um, if you're looking for just someone who I think nailed down brass through guitar pedals, RH Factor is a great source for that, especially for funk jazz genre. And I think that's about it I have for funk.
I didn't realize that when you said Raul de Souza earlier. I thought you said something else. And so you were talking about what'd you say?
Raul de Souza. That's how you say it in Portuguese.
Oh, yeah. I've always called him Raul de Souza. So I thought you were talking about like someone else. So then I was like, oh, Raul de Souza also does it. But we're talking about the same person.
Yeah.
He also plays with the slide.
Yeah. I think the La La song is a valve trombone. Just how it sounds. It's hard to tell sometimes.
Yeah, he definitely played a lot of valves. So
yeah.
Just gave Theon Cross a review. Good shit.
He's incredible. If you check out his group,
you need to check him out, man. Very Oysten Bodzicki.
Yeah.
Nice.
Multiphonics. I know you're all about that shit. All tuba players have to be now, though. Huh? It's kind of expected.
I did want to throw out some shameless some shameless knowledge because I got all excited. So Andre Hayward, first of all, is an incredible trombone player. Definitely, I've always thought like a deep cut. Like he's one of my favorite trombone players, and I don't feel like people talk about him enough. It's funny you mentioned RH Factor because in Roy Hargrove Big Band, he was like the soloist, and you know, wow. I feel like a lot of people listened to that Big Band album and they were like, "Oh man, the soloist is awesome," and then they just moved on with their lives. And I was like, "Well, no, dude, that was Andre Hayward." And if you listen to him, man, his tone is like absolute butter. Like I think he is top tier. Underappreciated in my opinion. The other person I am going to talk about Nils Langer a little bit because go ahead. I just love me some Nils, bro. I want to say that there's some kind of fun things. This isn't necessarily straight up pedal, but kind of tech around his horn. If you notice on some of his setups, he has like a bunch of different stuff going on. So he plays a red Yamaha trombone. But if you watch his videos, you'll notice that he has like a couple of them. Like Yamaha made him some different variations. Like he's got a removable bell on one of them. But a lot of times when he's playing like electric stuff or whatever, he's got like a little hookup on his like where his hand brace would be, like that part of the trombone. There's a little hookup for the microphone to like set up and then like come straight around and come into the bell, which is kind of nice. And then he's got like a little box set up in the back where the counterweight would be. And not really pedal related at all, but I think it's really cool. He's got a piano wire that's hooked up to the hand slide that goes down to his spit valve, so he can open his spit valve from his hand. Like he doesn't have to reach down and open it. He can just open it from the top. Like that was something he asked them to make him, and they did. I'm a huge Nils fan. He also plays some jazz stuff. He's incredible at that too. Definitely, he's probably my favorite funk trombonist, but, you know.
Also a great singer.
Yeah. You know, it's funny, I actually saw, there's like an interview where he was talking about he actually got pretty famous singing in Sweden, and he was saying like, you know, he's like, I actually thought I was a terrible singer, like I hate the way my voice sounds. He's like, but I had some success with it, and people kept asking me to sing, and he's like, even now, I don't love listening to myself sing, but it's just like brought me a lot of success, and... I've also always found that interesting. But yeah, he is a good singer. So many good. We'll have to do a Nils Landgren episode at some point. There's so many deep dives I could go into. I'm massive Nils Landgren fan. Moving on. Let's. I was looking for classical stuff, and I mainly just want to talk about one guy, and then kind of like a cool little other thing I saw. I will say that I was doing some digging on the trombone chat. I can't back this up. I wasn't there. I have no knowledge. But I saw someone talking about like Christian Lindbergh did a live performance, and he was mic'd, and at some point, with the way the room was set up or whatever, they used an effect on like one part of like a song he was playing. Which is crazy. And that was it. And the guy was saying like no one would have known. So that's got me thinking that I don't know. Maybe there's a bunch of stuff we don't even know about behind the curtain. But openly, I want to talk about Jorgen von Ryan, one of my favorite classical trombonists. He has this piece called Slipstream for trombone. It was composed by Florian Magnus Meyer, who's also known as Morayan. And I actually looked this dude up. He's like a heavy metal guitarist, which is crazy. I don't know. I just never investigated that, but it's pretty interesting. But basically what it is he's got like a loop station, and he starts off by blowing just through the mouthpiece, and then he does like some pops and makes some cool sounds, and like by the end of it, like he starts looping himself playing trombone. He has some pretty cool stuff going. And me and Ben actually saw him do like a little loop station thing at ITF. I don't know if you remember that, man. It was part of his performance. He like kind of walked over to the side of the stage and did a little loop station thing. I can't remember if it was exactly this piece or not. But I found another piece he did called Humble Heroes, which was also by the same composer. That was also like a loop station thing. And past that, just kind of like weird off the cuff thing. He's got if you go find the popular video where he's doing it, it's called like, look up, I don't know, Jorgen von Ryan loops or something. It'll pop up. It's like a pretty popular video of his. He's wearing this like blue shirt, and it's got like a ton of faces on it. Like if you look at it close, at first it just looks like it's blue and white, but if you look at it close, there's like it's like a crowd of people. And I always thought like, well, that's a crazy shirt. But then I was watching something else, and Bran Tatima was wearing a pink shirt that was the same thing. It had all the faces on it. So I don't know if there's like a Dutch connection there or what. But I don't know. Go check that out and check out his cool shirt. See if you can find one. If you find one, let me know. I'm interested in buying it. The other classical thing that I wanted to talk about was there's a Sweetwater video with Peter Steiner. If you're not familiar with Peter Steiner, he's kind of like an up and comer in the trombone world, like a super super talented classical player. Went to Juilliard, and I think he's just kind of a soloist right now. I think he's a Bach artist. But really good trombone player. But he has a video where he's just playing into a mic, and then he's playing through a bunch of different effect pedals and seeing how they sound. And it's pretty cool because he says himself like, oh, you know, I haven't really messed with any of this. Like, I don't know what it's going to sound like. And so it gives you kind of a cool idea of what you could be set up with pretty fast. I'm sure Sweetwater is doing it shamelessly, so you'll buy pedals through them. But nonetheless, it's cool that resource exists. But other than that, I didn't want to get too crazy with the classical stuff because I didn't find a ton of stuff out there. I did want to mention the Jorgen thing. I think he is kind of pushing into some cool stuff, and definitely go check out his loop station stuff with the slipstream thing. I also think the pieces sound really good. But what do you have for rock stuff, Jared?
Yeah, so there's a couple that came to mind when I thought rock musicians, rock trombone, and the first is Bonorama. The homies from New Orleans. If you haven't heard them yet, check them out. It's a full band fronted by trombonists. Mostly just playing rock and roll, dude. Their version of Ocean, which is a Led Zeppelin cover, there's a great solo on it. And I believe it's Mark Mullins playing it. I think he's the one who always does the pedals in the band, while the other trombonists, I don't believe they do that. Um, it's like heavy distorted, um, kind of they're trying to go for that distortion guitar sound. So you get this crazy, super harsh, almost trombone sound. I think there's also an envelope filter on it, making it a little bit more bubbly too. But it could also just be how he's playing because they're playing very New Orleansy, a lot of slide action in it. It could be part of that, or it's maybe a slight envelope filter. Um, I believe in this, it's like for sure an envelope filter, but other times they have the distortion. I'm not quite sure if there's an envelope on it. On the album Bringing It Home, there's also the Euroblues, which is also very distorted, but it also has this harmony with it. I'm not exactly sure how they're doing it. I think it's just going through same thing, kind of like the multivider, and then adding distortion to that extra tone. It makes it really interesting harmonic content, but also this really bold distortion. And you could also hear this distortion on their version of Helter Skelter. Um, and I think because of how popular Ocean was, they ended up making a Bonerama Plays Zeppelin album,
They
which did,
did. They did. I went to the show where they premiered it.
yeah. Yeah, that was like, what, it was only a couple years ago, right?
Yeah. It would have been no. Yeah. Right before COVID. Right before
Yeah.
COVID. Yeah, because I was at UNO. I know some of those are pretty well. Craig Klein, and I think we'd
Yeah.
be remiss if we didn't talk about Matt Perrine, the tuba
I'm a,
player in that band, is a bad dude.
yeah, I'm about to get to Matt Perrine. Very fortunate to get to play, take lessons from Matt Perrine my last semester at UNO. But on the Zeppelin album, super cool, the song Heartbreaker, uh, there's a sousaphone solo in the middle of it, but it has like either a bit of saturation or distortion, or he's just playing loud into the microphone. It's hard to tell. But there's a lot of delay on this sousaphone solo in the middle of this song. It's fantastic. Killer player, also great bass player. Um, Huge trad guy.
I actually played a
Um,
gig with him where he played the upright bass.
oh, nice. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's incredible. He could also rip it on euphonium really well.
he's a crazy good musician.
Yeah, if you haven't checked out Matt Perrine, definitely look him up. Also, you might know his other group, the New Orleans Nightcrawlers.
Yeah. Nightcrawlers is
Yes, fantastic player. But like the other album, there's a lot of distortion. They're going for that guitar sound. You can hear it on Living, Loving, Made, In My Time of Dying. That one is super interesting because they do the same thing with the harmony. I believe it's either in fourths or fifths. Um, and then the song Four Sticks, which has more reverb, which probably isn't an effect pedal, probably done in post production because it's easier to do it that way. But still worth noting that there's a clear effect put onto that trombone. Um, Moving on, this is a trumpet player because, uh, believe it or not, rock trombone is already pretty slim, and then rock trombonists who use effects are pretty slim. But Don Ellis has this like crazy big band version of Hey Jude by the Beatles, and the start of it is it's hard to describe. It sounds super metallic. I can't even tell if it's a trumpet. I'm guessing it's a trumpet using a ring modulator and a delay. Which are, if you're familiar with synthesis, ring modulators have a pretty distinct sound with how they change the harmonics. And in this version, it ends up sounding pretty much just like a synth. You can't even tell it's a trumpet, but I'm pretty sure um, because it's a Don Ellis song and it's there's obviously effects on the trumpet later in the song, that this beginning part of it is the trumpet going through a ring modulator. It sounds very much like, if you know the beginning of the song "Space Is the Place" by Sun Ra, it also has this weird synthy harshness. It sounds just like that, which I believe is, I don't know if that's a saxophone going through a ring modulator or a synthesizer being modulated. I gotta mention one of my favorite trombonists, Trombone Shorty. As far as a rock musician, keeping rock trombone alive, he's the man. He doesn't really use pedals that much, but on his song "Kept Us Quiet," there's clearly like some sort of filter, I believe, low pass filter cutting out the highs, and then it's distorted, and there's a delay on it, or larger reverb. And I think it's him playing trumpet on it. It's hard to tell because it's so distorted. It could be him playing trombone or trumpet. It's a little bit lower in the register, so it makes me question. But I think it's a trumpet. And on his live shows, he's known for using a delay. I don't know if he uses an actual pedal for this either, or if it's just done through the sound guy. Either way, there's you can look up performances of him using a delay pedal, and he tends to do it in a way that's use it as a rhythmic device. So since you can set the delay to be a certain amount or a certain BPM and repeat, let's say quarter notes after the note, he likes to layer kind of this sound and keep his own. It fills out a soloist playing, and he likes to do this on live shows. And then to wrap it all up with rock musicians, kind of the people who I think all of us were kind of captivated when it first came out, like YouTube with the Maniacal Four doing the "Carry On My Wayward Son" cover. We already talked about this. They were using the Yamaha Silent Brass to get that guitar sound. It's very similar to the way that Bonorama uses it on Oceans. I think they were probably using the Yamaha Silent Brass. We were talking about this earlier, but I think the reason for that, other than a microphone, is just to get more of a clean tone to go through the distortion. But you could have easily used a microphone for that same purpose. And I actually am fairly unfamiliar with Maniacal 4, but I know you guys know a bit more about them as a ensemble. If you want to talk.
Yeah, I got to see them live. It was pretty neat. They actually came to our college and did a couple master classes, did a classical recital of trombone quartets. They did some standard trombone quartet literature, and they followed it up with like a rock concert. And it was pretty neat. They did do the silent brass then. I do remember that. And he also told the story of how he decided to just mess around with it. Was he was just sitting around bored. He was sick. He said he was like sick at Carl did, the guy, the person who started soloing at least. He said he was bored, sick at home, and he couldn't go anywhere. So he just decided to mess around and somehow ended up with that. Decided to try to learn the "Carry On My Wayward Son" or guitar solo on trombone. So it was interesting.
Yeah,
That
it's
was
awesome.
that was the year before I went to UAM. Ben is actually older than me. He's an old man. And he's like a whole year older than me. But but yeah, that was before I got there. But though it was because our trombone teacher at the time went to school with all those guys. They all went to UNT together. So it was Carl Lundgren. I can pull up the exact names. It was Carl Lundgren, Nick Loffer, Alex Dubrov, and Matt Jefferson. And for some reason, I don't know why, I have Nick Loffer's email. I emailed him about something at some point. No idea. No idea why. I think he plays with like a country artist now. I was telling Ben this the other day. That's like his gig. I think it's him and that trumpet player who plays with Bob Reynolds in L.A. I don't know. This is Trombone Pod. I don't gotta look him up. Nick Loffer. This guy's a really good website. I don't even feel bad about about getting off track here because we're supporting Trombone. But oh, it looks like he teaches at Vanderbilt. Huh. Look at that. Go check him out. Go check out Nick Lawfer. He's got a good website. He's got some pictures of his dog on here. That's cool. Oh, I'm getting taken to Yaya Jennings is the name of this trumpet player I was trying to think of. He's also in Snarky Puppy, if you wanna, I don't know, webs of connectivity.
Speaking of Snarky Puppy, they also like to use pedals a lot, but they mostly use it for saxophone.
Yeah. Well, that's gonna kind of wrap our thoughts on pedals. I know it was kind of all over the place, but I think that's also, I mean, no doubt we missed stuff. Like I said at the beginning of this, we're not the pedal guys by any means, but at the same time, like I think that's kind of the nature of trombone and the pedals right at the moment. You know, if you look up, say, bass players and pedals, like go to YouTube and Google bass player pedals. Ridiculous amount of suggestions. I know a guy that I'm super into, Yannick Wisdal, is like he's got like a whole subsect of his content devoted to pedals, like showing you pedals and yeah. So I mean, it's a whole thing, and I think we're gonna go around the room real fast and talk about kind of our takeaways from like researching this and learning about pedals. You know, for me, I think it's just that like we haven't quite had the pedal guy yet. I don't think. Maybe Robin Eubanks. I did mention I do think Robin is like a huge one for giving people a launching point, but you know, I think if you look at the way that like Albert Mangelsdorf like was the guy for multiphonics, not saying that other guys don't do that, but like he really, it was his thing and he did it super well, and he like had a huge, like if you want to learn about it, you need to go back to him. Like I don't think that we've necessarily had that guy with electronic stuff, and I think that that'll happen. I think that like there's a lot of room to explore. I mean, like it's like Ben was talking about, there's cheaper and cheaper options to get into it too, so that should help with the barrier to entry. But yeah, I think that it's something that needs exploration. I'm into seeing where it goes, you know. I mean, I there's people we didn't even talk about in this, you know. Alto Bone, Michael Lake has some cool stuff where he uses some cool effect stuff. There's certainly a lot of people dabbing in it. And I went to Trombone Chat and I saw people who were talking about their pedal setups and their boards, and I was like, oh, that's super cool. But it's definitely not commonplace. It's not JJ Johnson, if you will. It's not like, oh, you play trombone, you need to know about this. So yeah, I'm kind of interested to see where it goes. What was your takeaways from the episode, Ben?
Yeah, so I guess the biggest thing I learned was, or at least my favorite thing I learned was about. I didn't realize that the guitar's distortion pedal, for example, was really to imitate the horns. That's pretty neat that it got its roots in that little point of pride. They tried to push us out of a job, but we stayed in.
Jared, what you got, man?
Yeah, I think a good takeaway from this is there is no perfect setup. There's no anything. It's kind of just, you know, a playing field for making new sounds. Again, if you look up trombone pedals, you're not going to find anything. These are just hardware pedals that they expect people to use for mostly guitar or bass. But why not put a trombone through it? Try it out. There's not a lot of people doing it, and it's definitely worth just picking up, testing it out. If you, I like the idea. If next time you're at a gig, you're next to your guitar player friend, yeah, try to hook up your microphone through that. See what their pedals sound like. If you put your trombone through it, it's really just for fun. There's a lot of possibilities, and I think that's really exciting.
So our album rec for this week, we already kind of talked about just recently, in fact, but it is Maniacal 4's Carry On. The trombone players are Carl Lundgren, Nick Loffer, Alex Dubrov, and Matt Jefferson on bass trombone. The rhythm section is on guitar, Matt Hornbeck. On drums, Sean Jones. Bass, Brian Ward. And piano, Addison Frey. I don't know. It's a cool album. I think that, I think about different points in my life, things that have impacted me. I think it had an impact on me. I definitely for a minute was listening to it. I think that they did Renegade on there, and like the part where they all go up like the octave, I thought that was super cool. It's like they're really good trombone players. It's a cool album. Definitely something to check out if you're looking at like listening to like rock trombone or listening to effect pedal stuff. But yeah, that's our album rec, and I truly appreciate you guys if you made it all the way through this episode. Hopefully you picked something up. And as always, thanks for listening and happy shitting.